lunch. So thank you all for coming, and thank you Mr. Dorai, Mr. Arun and Ms.Indu for joining us. So today we have all gathered here for two things. So you will learn how to pitch with a story and you will perfect your pitch. So there will be two sessions. First one is pitch with a story by Mrs. Indu, and the next part will be perfect your pitch by Mr. Dorai. So let me introduce you Mrs. Indu Divya. Indu Divya is a professional storyteller, speaker, story coach, and a content writer. So she believes deeply in the magic of storytelling to engage, entertain, and inspire an audience. Through her brand, The Narrative, she empowers people by helping them connect and communicate effectively, both with others and their own selves, by harnessing the power of stories. So I believe for a pitch, you need to carry a story. Everything has a story. So you should be able to communicate so that you get the right. So everyone has a story. So will you be able to communicate so that you achieve your goal? So when you're going to meet an investor, so your pitch should carry an idea. Your pitch should carry a story, and you should be able to communicate properly. So today's session will help you do that properly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. So if it's just so many of us, I think I'm audible. Yeah. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's impossible. Better this mic is, if you use mic is better.
Divya. And when people introduce me as a storyteller, a professional storyteller, or when I introduce myself as a professional storyteller, I know there's something going on in people's minds. Storyteller, professional storyteller. A lot of them are thinking that I'm probably just spinning a yarn to keep them hooked. But the truth is, I tell stories because I enjoy it, and I have seen that it does hook people. But the reason I am a professional storyteller is because I believe that stories have that power to engage people, to help them connect and communicate, both with themselves and with others. Now, I think one of the most important questions you can answer, only you can answer, is what's your story? Nobody else can do this but you. So, before I get you thinking on that, I think it's very important that I share my story with you. As a professional storyteller, I think that journey of mine to being a professional storyteller is very, very important. It's very significant to me, it's very special to me, and I think you should know that. It's 2013, one of the lowest phases of my life, a very, very challenging phase. I just realized that my marriage is on the rocks. And anything and everything that I was doing to help salvage the marriage was not working. I was so lost, so lonely, and I so desperately needed help. And that's when my yoga teacher told me, she said, Indu, there is this one course that I really want you to do. This is a program on Indian philosophy at the Indian Psychology Institute in Pondicherry. It was an 8-day intensive residential program. And the moment I heard that, I said no. Because with 2 children, I had never, even for 1 day, left them behind. To think of actually going for 8 days was definitely not something I could think of. But my yoga teacher is someone who I had very, very high regard for. I valued her opinions because it really helped me all the time. And when she was so insistent, I thought I should give it a shot. If not for anything, just to help myself. I went for the program, and that was the first time I had stepped out of my comfort zone. Now, at the program at Pondicherry, they told us that at the end of the program, we would have to make a presentation. And since the program was largely self-study, what it really meant was we would have to share our stories. With someone like me, who was so fiercely guarded, to actually share my story was very, very horrifying as a thought. But the program, the self-study, the journaling, all of that really helped me to acknowledge my story. And I can tell you that was one of the hardest things. Most of us kind of just think that it's something that we know our stories, but when we actually look back at it and we acknowledge it, it can sometimes be tough. Well, to cut to the story, D-Day came, and it was very tough for me to go stand there and share my story for the very first time to a group of people who until a week back were complete strangers. But I can tell you that as I battled my tears and choked on my words and shared my story, something happened. At the end of it, when I was done, I felt so light and so liberated. It was for the first time I realized that in being vulnerable, you can have a lot of power. It can be very, very empowering. But something else happened. I realized that when I was done with the story and when I looked at people, I was looking into people who had moist eyes, a room full of people. And that was when I realized how powerful a personal story can be in connecting with people. Over a period of time, I started writing my stories, I started journaling my stories, and it helped me discover so much about myself. And when I started sharing my stories, I was instantly connecting with people. Stories and storytelling at that point in time, when I was so lost, so lonely, and lacked direction, it gave me what I so needed at that time. It gave me a way where I could instantly connect with people. I was making connections with people, genuine, meaningful connections. It introduced me to my gift. And more than anything, it introduced me to my purpose. The narrative, which is my brand, was launched mainly to fulfill that sense of purpose. So at the narrative, the vision of the narrative is to empower people to live inspired, joyous, and meaningful lives. And we do this by harnessing the power of stories. We believe that people can, and they do, connect better with others and with themselves when they share their stories. So this is my story. And you may wonder why I just shared it. For reasons other than what I just told you. I think when we are in an engagement, it is very important for you to know who I am, where I come from, what I do, why I do it, and for that matter, what is in it for you to listen to me. Well, now you know the story and how much I believe in a story and how I believe it will help anybody. It brings us, let me quickly just tell you how I have structured this presentation. The points that I will be touching upon are: 1, why storytelling is so important. 2, the components of a story, how a story needs to be structured. And 3, the elements that go into making a story very, very compelling. Something that you probably need to include when you're pitching for funds. So coming to the first thing of why storytelling is so important, can I just get it from you? Why do you think storytelling is so important?
It gives you an emotional connection.
Okay, it helps you connect emotionally, yes?
Remembering recalling is easier.
Right?
The problem can be explained in a manner which is easy for us to understand it.
Super. What else?
Sets a good context.
Sets a good context, yes? And also, it helps build trust. Something that is so key for any relationship, including business, right? When you're doing business with people, you need to know who are the people that you're doing business with. Are they reliable? I'm investing in you. So can I trust you with my money? Will I get my returns? That's very, very key, isn't it? When we look at storytelling or the resurgence, I'm not sure I can use the word resurgence because, well, I don't think stories ever went away to make a comeback. But if you see, of late, there's so much of importance given to storytelling, especially in a business context. The point is, stories have been around for so long, right? According to anthropologists, if you look at them, what they say is, when fire was invented, it completely fastened the evolution of humans. That's because we had fire, it helped us cook. And when we ate food that was cooked, it radically increased the size of the brains. That was one. Two, it also helped keep predators away. Something that was very important if you wanted to live to the next day, to see the next sunrise, right? But apparently, the most significant aspect of inventing fire was that it sparked imagination. Because after daytime, when fire was lit to keep, at night, what people did, what early people, our ancestors did, was they gathered around the fire. And what do you think after they gathered around the fire? What do you think they did? They shared stories, yes, they talked. And they talked about their strategies, what they did, how they went hunting, what were the ways they actually avoided danger, and what were the ways they could actually, in case there were problems, how could they sort it out? So when they did this, they helped, they just learned new information, and they also built a sense of community. And that is what storytelling does. It builds a sense of community, right? When we look at how storytelling can take us to the next level. For instance, sorry, I just got interrupted. If I had to share with you, the components of a story, I think I'll just skip to that. The components of a story. Essentially, when we're looking at a story, we're looking at a structure that has the three basics, right? A beginning, a middle, and an end. And the beginning, the thing about the story structure is that you can play around with the formats. You can have the beginning, come right. You can have the middle. You can start off with the middle. You can go to the beginning and then come back to the end. Like how I started my story. You already knew I was a professional storyteller. I had to go back to the beginning and then come back to the end, right? You can also start with the end. You can start with, you can follow a linear structure. You start with the beginning, you go to the middle, and then you go to the end, okay? So while this is the basic structure, there is some components that are very, very key to it. And these are the 4 C's, the 3 C's and 1 I. The first is context. Like you were saying, you need to establish a context in which your story is taking place. So in your case, you're probably talking about a product or a service that you're pitching. So what is the context to that, right? Where is it happening? What is the general scene? Why is there a need for something like this? B, a character. Who are the people who are going to be using it? Who's the central character, the main protagonist of this? Typically, it helps when you can have that character as somebody that can be identified by the people who are listening to you. Yes? Are you all with me?
Yes.
So we have context, we have character. There is also conflict. At some point in time, there is something that is creating a conflict where this person cannot move forward. It could be another person that's come in the picture, it could be an event, or it could be a situation. Yes? Because of that, there is a problem. And we don't know, it's challenging the status quo. We don't know how to move forward with it. That's the conflict. As a result, what happens is you get some insights. And when you apply those insights, the insights could be some kind of findings that you have chanced upon. How you apply that eventually leads to the resolution. A conflict and a resolution is very, very key to a story. So when you're applying it to your story, it's very important to keep this in mind. Yes? If we look at the kind of stories that you may want to share, typically, rather the kind of stories that are shared by people, are stories where they're talking about who they are, like I just mentioned, right? Who are my stories? Stories of identity. You might wonder, why would you need to share that story with your investor? Like I said, it is about creating trust. It's about, can I believe this person? Do I believe in his idea? B, it is stories about, why am I here? What do I do? Why I do what I do? The why is very, very important, because people, when they see your passion, sometimes they just invest in your passion, right? But then how you can actually translate that passion to a way that connects with the person forms a part of your story. Another thing is vision stories. When you have a vision for yourself, for your life, for people around you, how can you make the world a more interesting place? Maybe your app or your product or your service is going to do that. But how exactly is it going to do that? That's what this story would talk about. Yes? So as people who are going to be pitching, I think these are the more suited stories that you would want to share. The other stories are stories about, teaching values. Typically the ones that are used in business contexts, like how you need to be resilient, or how you need to be very persevering, things like that. But I don't think those would find much thing here. Now we move on to what makes for a story to be very, very compelling. Sometime back in many, many years ago, on the terrace of a very, very fancy luxury apartment, two men stood beside each other, overlooking a lake. Neither of them spoke for a very, very long time. And then the one who was considered a rebel, the one who was dressed in a black turtleneck and blue jeans, finally decided to speak. He looked at his friend and said, "So are you sure you're going to be spending the rest of your life selling sugar water? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Apparently this question by Steve Jobs to his friend John Scully changed things a lot. John had been offered by Steve Jobs to actually run Apple, and he had turned it out. He said he wanted to continue his stint with PepsiCo. But this question made him really think. He wondered, would he really be missing something in his life? And that was the aha moment for him. So there are a lot of these moments that happen, and it happens just like that in an instant. The only reason this happened was because, he says, Steve was so passionate about his idea. And that was what convinced me to go ahead with him. So, like they say, sometimes when you have an idea, there's just no point in having an idea when you really can't help somebody else persuade or buy into your idea. There can be nothing greater, a bigger waste than having an idea that is not packaged properly. An idea by itself sometimes may not be bad. It may be good, but it all depends on how it is packaged and how it is pitched to somebody else. And that's exactly what Steve did that day. So Steve Jobs, if you've read about him, if you've seen his movies, I think one thing that really comes through very, very clearly in all of it is his passion. People talk about his presentations. They're supposed to be marvelous. They're legendary. There's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of drama in it. And there is definitely story in it. Because Steve Jobs always believed that you needed to have a story to get people interested, to get people to buy into your vision. So, passion, like I said, is one of the things. We move on to the next component, which is actually delivering it. How do you deliver? You have passion, but how do you tell the other person that you have passion? How do you deliver something in a way that is so convincing, that comes from the heart? Apparently, a lot of people use something called a sensory experience when they're sharing their story. And this, in very, very simple words, what it means is using imagery, using words that create a picture. How does the world look like? How does it feel like? How does it smell like? How do you feel like when you are a part of that scenario? That's exactly what the sensory experience is all about. And that is something people who are very, very skilled use with their words, use with their stories. Remember, I was talking to you about our ancestors and how they sat around the fire and shared stories. We have tribesmen like that still, Nepalahari tribesmen. So apparently, the most skilled of those people are people who use something called multimodal communication. Any guesses what this could be?
So I'm talking about hand gestures and things like that.
Yes.
Mind.
So it's using, yes, exactly, using your hands, using your expressions, using your voice. So these are people who actually create an experience through, looking or imitation sounds, sound effects, songs, anything to make the entire experience something that people will listen to and remember. So that is something that you may also want to include. Purposeful is the last of the components, something very, very important. What are you trying to really say when you are sharing your story? Buy my product, invest in my product, be with me. It could be anything. Like I said, when you're sharing stories, it could be for any reason. It could be just to garner somebody's support. It could be just to, get people to fund your ideas. It could be just to tell people what you are thinking. It could be anything. So when you have that idea in mind, obviously here your idea is to get people to buy and fund your project, your idea. How do you go about doing it? You may want to consider these 3 questions when you are drafting your story. 1, when you open your story, ask people a question or throw them a challenge that will get them thinking. It could be anything. Something that grabs their attention. A question or a challenge that you have for them. Something that's related to what you have to offer. Yes? 2, build a story around it. A story that emotionally connects with people. A story that tells them how it can completely change the present scenario for them. Obviously, in your story, you're going to talk about what the present state of affairs is, and how by using your product or your service, it can completely bring about a change. So bring that into your story, into your pitch. And the last, get them to make that action. There's this one story that I read about which kind of really hooked me on. This is by a person who had founded something called the breathometer. The CEO of this product is an app. I forget his name, but I think it's something. I think it's Chris Michael, something like that. I'm not too sure of his name. So when he was pitching, all he did was he just went, introduced himself. He said, "I'm CEO of this company, and this is the product that we have. Let me give you a scenario. Imagine you're at a party, and there are drinks, and he just goes, he takes one, and he drinks it. There were drinks available at that place. And he said, you know how typically these kind of events pan out? Once there are drinks, there's food, everybody's having a good time. Finally, it comes to an end and you want to go back home. But now the question is it safe for you to drive back home? Now, the only way you can actually check that is with the breath analyzers, and he pulls out something. The bulky breath analyzers all these cops use. He said, now, do you want to lug around with something like this? I don't think so. Instead, what you can do is you can use what I have, and he does a Steve Jobs over there, and he pulls his, he pulls this thing out of his pocket, the trouser pocket. And it is something that looks like an adapter, a phone adapter, a smartphone adapter. And he gives them a demonstration of how it really works. He just plugs it in, he takes the smartphone, switches it on, and he breathes into it. And the moment he breathes into it, within a matter of seconds, the app shows how much the level of alcohol is. It's not just that, it's also, the app is also designed in such a way that it tells you how long it will take for the person to sober down. Besides that, he also has something else. If the person is not in a position to drive, the app had a facility where you can actually hail a cab. And he just ends by saying, please join me in helping make this place smarter and safer, just one breath at a time. All he wanted was, I think, about X amount, about $2 lakh, $250,000. He ended up getting 1 million. People there were so impressed, they just signed up. And that's the power of a story. How convincing you can be with what you're trying to share. Yes? So I gave you 3 questions. The first question, anybody here? Start off with a challenge. Yes?
Build a story or a great story.
Okay.
Emotional.
Right? And the last one?
Get them to make an action.
Get them to make an action. Yes. So I'm guessing this should be a good framework for you to build your story on. From what we have over here, we plan to listen to your pitches. So if you can use this as a template, please do that. Meanwhile, I hand the session over to Mr. Thodla. He's going to take it over. Before that, if you have any questions, thank you very much.
Give me a couple of minutes to record and then think a little bit about the stories. This is going to be a very different session because it's a lot more facts. The bunch of us in TiE, Arun, myself, Praveen Shekhar, and a whole bunch of other charter members, we listen to a lot of pitches from startups for a variety of reasons. People just want to come and tell us their stories sometimes during a tea break or a coffee break. Sometimes they want to know what we think with this work and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes they said, hey, should I get funding or not? Should I just try to, is this the best way for me to go forward? What do you think? So lots of people come and ask lots of different questions, and everybody starts at a different point, and everybody tells us a different set of things, and then we start asking them a set of questions. And so what I have are 10 questions that I want you to think about, and you may want to have answers to all of this, and then the way you want to package it is like what Indu was telling you, is that there is an emotional connect. Mine doesn't have that much of an emotional connect, but you need to have an emotional connect when you start. But I'll also take the story a little one step further. You're going to tell 2 stories, not one story. So when somebody says, what is your story? You don't say I was born in 1949. I was born. So you're not going to start saying that, right? That is not your story. Your story, you tell your customer story. I was walking across the street when I found this person doing, I saw my grandchildren struggle with books and boring materials to study, and I want to make it really interesting for them. So I designed this product that will help children learn better, for example. So that is one story you want to tell, and the customer story is the one that they have to buy into. Then you have to tell your story of how you fit into the picture of the customer story, right? So that, there is a kind of synergy saying that, so they're going to always, there is the saying that people invest in teams and not necessarily in ideas, which is partly true. I think it's a combination of several things. So there is a context, and every question that I put up, anybody can raise your hand and you can ask more questions. And we'll probably spend a couple of minutes on each slide. And then what I would like you to do is, if you have answers to all these questions, and you are willing to come and pitch, I want you to come up and stand up or sit here, wherever you want to do, and give us a pitch, okay? And cover as many, not all of them, but cover as many as possible, okay? So the first story is, what is your product or service? Lots of people come and start off and they start talking about the team, and then they go saying, oh, the guy worked in CTS, I worked in Infosys, we started 4 years ago, we were doing supply chain management, I was in US, this guy. That is, it's a lot of facts, right? And nobody is going to remember any of that stuff after you're gone. Oh, yeah, CTS and Infosys establishes certain, everybody says, okay, oh, so these guys know about international market, they would have worked with, all that kind of thing. So it is important, I'm not saying that it's not important, but that is not the start. The start is a story about your product. So for everything you probably want to attach the story part. Say the story about your product. Why did you come up with this product or service? He said, oh, when I was working at Infosys, I found that this set of customers we were never paying attention to because they were too small for a big business. So I decided to start this company and serve them, for example. So that is the kind of stuff that you want to kind of tell. So very clearly, within the first 30 seconds, people should know what is your product or service. Okay, the sooner you do it, the better. In fact, if you, let's say after 30 seconds, one of the mentors gets a call and then he walks out and then he comes back 9 minutes later and said, oh, what happened? The only thing that we want them to remember is what is it that you are trying to do. Okay, that is one very important thing. So once you say product or service, I use product or service, but I may just end up using either product or service for the rest of my examples, but I'm saying they're somewhat similar. Who are your customers? So the first thing we want to know is, with lots of, I come from a very geeky background, like a techies, and this is a big problem for all the techies out here. We somehow think our ideas are going to be the best things since sliced bread, right? And we always start out with an idea, and we're always talking about our idea, and then I have seen presentations, like this pitch fest preliminaries or training things, where 9.5 minutes out of 10 minutes are sent by how deep you can go into the product. And sitting there are a bunch of guys who have absolutely no connection with this product or in the domain or any of that service. They're all saying, hey, how is this guy going to make money? Why is he telling me all these things? And people go to the extent, let me show you my circuit diagram, you know. Nobody wants to. So first you stand at a very high level and say, who is your customer? You may have multiple customer segments. So don't ever say, the whole world is my customer. Everybody is my customer. You're gone. You lost it right there. I will turn off. And then I'll start thinking about all the other things in my life rather than listening to your story. Because that means you have not done enough research. The whole world may be your customers. And Facebook may think so, right? But it's still, even for them, it is not the whole world. Right? It's like a part of the world. Only the people who have internet access, right? So if the whole world is not your customers, it's a very small niche, and even if it is the whole world, you have a starting point. What is the starting point and who are you? So whenever you say who are your customers, there's a bunch of questions that are not mentioned but kind of implied. How are you going to reach these guys? Okay, how many of them are there? Do they have the purchasing power? Your product doesn't exist today. What are they doing right now? Right? Each one of them is a story, right? In some sense. So you need to start thinking about that. So you talked about your product and service, you talked about the customer, but you need to kind of connect. Say what is the problem? So you don't have to necessarily do this in this manner, but it could be in any order, right? You choose the order. So a story can be a problem. The story I said is, oh, I just watch lots of young people and they're always running out of battery power in their mobile devices, which is a true story for all of us. And then I watch them and they're running around trying to see this thing. And I have come up with this fantastic little cable that you can connect to your neighbor's phone and then borrow some charge. And then I can create exactly, just to make one more call or to find the next. Will I sell this cable? That's just like 50 rupees per cable or 100 rupees per cable. Will you buy it? So let's say this is my product. I think you will all buy this, right? Especially if it is 50 bucks. It's almost like giving it away. But there is a product that a student built, but that's not where you start. He said, I have a cable that connects two phones and transfers charge. It's the most boring thing. And say, have you noticed that lots of people, when they just want to call their mom, somehow there is no battery in that phone. Or they're in the middle of a crucial call, power is gone kind of stuff. What do you do in those cases? So some, stuff like that. So what is the problem? And what is the part of the problem that you're solving? So you may not be solving the entire problem. You're solving maybe a part of the problem. So how do you take that part of the problem and make it very, very clear? And so that is one thing that you need to be prepared. So it could be a bunch of problems and you may be trying to solve, but generally I'm saying that when the business may be at different stages. If you are in ideas to prototype or initial idea validation stage, nobody believes that you can solve all the problems. So if you want to be very credible, you pick a small niche and say, I want to solve these three problems. I have not decided which one. I'm going to go around and talk to a bunch of people and I found this problem to be more than this. I assumed that this problem was more important, but then when I went into the field and started talking to people, they said, no, solve this problem first. So that is why I came up with this. See, even that, what you want is, at every point in time, the people you are talking to, you want them nodding their heads and they need to resonate, right? They need to understand and you have to get them into that level of understanding. So don't go into a deep dive saying I have this drone that will do this, and when we had those kinds of cases too. So don't go off, just watch them. Look at their body language. Are they listening to you? Do they understand? Are they even asking questions? And I said earlier, Arun said that we'll give 10 minutes for you to pitch and 5 minutes for people to ask questions. And most of the people are so passionate about their product and service, they'll take the entire 15 minutes and then somebody like Badri or Akshay will come and say, time to move, or they'll ring a bell. So there's no questions asked. So you don't know what happened. You dump your stuff on this guy and you have no clue as to whether this guy understood it or they nothing. In fact, I would reverse the other way. Talk for 5 minutes and ask them whether they have any questions. And if they're really interested in your stuff, They'll ask you questions for 10 minutes. They'll ask you, what is your background? They'll ask you the questions for which you were not even allowed to present before. They'll say, hey, where did you come from? How did you get this insight into the marketplace? Why do you think this problem is this? Because not every person you are talking to understands the space that you are trying to attack. You have done more research, more work, and you know more than they do, and you are just, this is like a knowledge sharing session. You want them to come onto the same page and feel exactly the way you feel about the problem, right? So that's why take a smaller amount of time, make it very clear, and then get into all these things. Only every chance they give you, will take some more time. And there are cases when somebody comes and says time out and say, no, we'll talk to them for 5 more minutes. But a lot of what you will see happening on Saturday is that somebody will say, you know what, we should talk to this guy. But the nice thing about 5 minutes is, suppose that's a domain in which I have zero interest in being a mentor or helping you or funding you or whatever it is, but I know somebody else who can help you. He said, okay, this is a good story, I noted down all the points, everything is good, we'll evaluate you anyway quickly and saying, okay, you can go to the next thing, but I also want you to talk this, and this person. And those connects are very, very important, especially among TiE charter members. There are lots of good people who can help you. You have people from Chennai Angel Network, people from Indian Angel Network, individual investors, people, mentors, all people will point to a variety of resources. So use this opportunity to tell, talk about your business. So once you talk about the problem, you talk about what is your solution. Obviously this problem is solved in some way, or people are living with the problem in some way. So your solution is not necessarily exactly another competitor who is exactly like you. It could be somebody who is providing an alternate. So for example, for charging phone, we also carry battery packs. What happens is when, if you can put a solar panel at the back of your, or in a cover of your phone, and that can charge the phone, that is an alternative, which some people say exists, but I haven't seen one. There are so many other ways of, wireless charging could be, there are several solutions to this problem. What exactly is the solution that you are providing? And how do you, why is that important? So that is one thing that we want to talk about. And when you talk about solution, don't go into the deep depth of how you have solved it and all this other stuff. We'll come to that. If they are interested, they'll ask. The reason when people ask you these questions is because either they don't understand. So listen to the questions. Don't ever get defensive when people ask you questions. They're not challenging you. They want to actually understand. I don't think I know exactly how. I don't know how this works. How will this work? And that is the question that is going through in their mind, and they want to ask you that question. And so for everything, and if they give you suggestions, take them. You can answer some of those questions and you can clarify certain things, but don't get into like a deep argument about what is the size of the IoT market in the next 20 years and that kind of stuff. Those things do not really matter. So talk about the solution, and then they want to know who is your competition. This question has several underlying things in it. First, what will be the first answer? I'm going to randomly pick somebody, okay? Or somebody can volunteer. Tell me somebody anybody wants to volunteer, I'll ask you a couple of questions. Yeah, go ahead. Your name, sir?
RS Mani.
RS Mani. Please sit down. So I'm not even asked you what is your product, but so maybe you can tell me what is your product.
The product is MyStim. It's a lifesaver wearable which connects the user immediately in an emergency to the nearest hospital.
Okay, good. And what's your competition? I'll skip the other questions and I'll go directly. What is your competition?
Competition mostly we have in US and European market. In India, we have emerging companies who are like Call Ambulance is one service.
Okay.
Yeah, Philips LifeSense is one product. Yeah.
So okay, good. So here at least you identified. Do you know what is the size of the market? How many of these units Philips has sold?
Philips I may not be aware, but there is one competitor who has got about 54 million customers with them.
Where in India?
In US.
In US. Okay. But in India, do you know anybody who has
India
sold?
10,000 customer base they have.
There is a company that has 10,000.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
All ambulance.
Call ambulance. And how does call ambulance work?
It works with the app. It it has got a mobile app.
Okay.
Our USP is something different. We have a wearable device. We don't
Okay.
depend on the app.
So how does your wearable device work? So let us say I wear your thing and then I have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
So basically, this works if you have a chest pain or heart attack and you need an emergency care. This is a device. You need to just click this button, and it connects to our MyStip
So all I have to do is click a button.
Click a button.
Have the presence of mind to click a button. And anybody else, like for example, my 87-year-old mom can also come and
Yes.
click a button if I'm just lying down and not.
Yes.
That's fairly easy. So look at that, right? There is some research. They know about the competition. They know how many million units some US companies sold. We are in these kinds of things. We are always slightly slower in adoption. And then who is your competition? I think the competition you talked about are direct product competitors, right? Because you talked about USP being different and all that sort of stuff. But there are maybe a whole bunch of other competitors which are alternatives, way of solving problems. So people may never buy this kind of thing, right? So if it's an old person or somebody there's already a nurse or somebody like that, and they can call an ambulance, they can call somebody. So there are several ways, and if you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you'll start getting more information about it. But this is the minimum level with which you need to be prepared. Okay. Somebody else wants to do this again. One more. Yeah. Go ahead. Please sit down.
So my service is around providing tailored and transparent insurance to small businesses. Okay. I'm specifically focusing on a business that's not a crore and a half of investment. Okay. That's my business.
That's your business. And what is the competition?
My competition is, and like you said, it's traditional competition is there from banks, because banks are, when you go for a loan, business goes for a loan, banks offer insurance. Insurance agents and insurance brokerages are traditional sector competition. On the non-traditional side, there are other digital players like Policy Reserve, Policy X, and players like Echo Insurance that just got registered.
Okay.
Digit Insurance.
All right. So you have a list. So look at his. So we have seen two different cases, right? So you are all the investors right now. Okay. And you are willing to invest let's say 50 lakhs into one of these businesses. Which one will you invest? Randomly I'll pick somebody. Why don't you give me which one will you invest? You don't feel offended for this. I'm trying to make a point. Yeah.
I will invest in the device.
Okay. I'll get some more samples and then I'll ask you why. Indu, what will you invest in? Akila, what will you invest in? Akila is not in the business of investing.
So I wasn't listening, sorry.
Okay.
Excuse me, I
All
was
right.
with me.
I want one more volunteer in the group.
Sorry.
Anybody else? Yeah, both of you.
The second one, I think we are not talked much actually. We couldn't hear properly what he was saying.
Correct. So yes, that was deliberate.
Otherwise, if we go, I will go with the script only. The
Okay.
second one was not able to communicate what he wanted, what his competition was.
Okay, we'll come to that. Yeah. You. First
We
one.
know the device, we understand the device, we couldn't understand this.
So the story is this, right? He has as good a story as this. His is a very specialized product. But none of us have the domain expertise. All of us know about emergency is pressing a button. That story is simplified to such an extent that it didn't require, you don't have to beat on the head with it, right? What happened in this story is, first of all, it's some specialized, it comes into the financial market, right? Product. First of all, the moment somebody says insurance, my eyes black out, right? I just turn off. I said, insurance, not for me, kind of thing. But if he sat in front of a banker, the guy would pay a lot of attention. He'll say, what do you do? And he'll ask him 10 different questions. The reason why I didn't ask him many questions is I don't know anything about his field. Whereas I could ask him a lot of common sense questions which require no knowledge of the field. So what is happening is that when you get into a specialized product, and it doesn't minimize the importance of the product. When you get into a very specialized product, you have a very big problem. The problem is of education or simplifying. And we can do some email thing, go back and forth. I would start your pitch entirely differently. I would simply say, take one there is one difference, let's say, pick one difference between your insurance and all the other ones, like LIC, because that is the only insurance company I know. And I know everybody probably knows about LIC. So tell me one important difference between yours and theirs.
LIC is not, maybe so one important difference is that this is, like you said, this is a segment that nobody cares to address. They are underserved population, SMEs because of the economics of scale.
So it's not a life insurance, it's for business insurance.
Business insurance.
Did that come through in when he explained it?
In proximity, yes.
Proximity, yes. Because you listen to everything very carefully. So venture intelligence. So there is a lot of. So that is. So it requires a certain knowledge, and then one thing you may want to make sure is the persons you are talking to, whether they actually understand what you are saying, or they are sympathetically just nodding their head because they don't want to look stupid. Because I would sympathetically nod my head because I don't want to look stupid, right? So I think so there is an intrinsic problem in telling your product stories because you can't really do a pitch unless you know the audience, right? So how will you know the audience? You always start out by asking, can I ask you a couple of questions? And trying to understand the audience, or find out who are all the people who are going to be there in Pitch Fest. Quickly go through their profiles, and I think we have chapter member profile information. You can Google them. Most of us are on LinkedIn. You can ask, just understand your audience a little bit better, and then you convert your story and make it more understandable to the audience. For example, if you are pitching me insurance, first thing I'll say is, one of the reasons why I asked for a 30-second pitch before I asked for the 5-minute pitch is, I said, boss, I'm the wrong person for this. I said, two things. What do you need? Product. Which segment? Just block this segment. But actually TiE does a good job of allocating mentors to the right people so that you will not be sent, you will never be sent to me. Some dude who is building some IoT device or doing data science will come to me. So that is an allocation. But by mistake what happens is, oh, that mentor is free, why don't you go and pitch to him? And then sometimes that kind of stuff will also happen, and then you go and start a conversation. So understand a little bit. You can say, it's perfectly fine to ask, do you understand the insurance industry? Okay, are you interested? Do you think, like some qualifying questions, asking absolutely no problem. If your product is very specialized, if product is generalized, if I'm selling, learning games for kids, I can talk about it to almost anybody. So the competition, you have a lot of competition, I was kind of disappointed. Anybody here thinks they don't have competition? I want to listen to one person who thinks they don't have competition.
Yes, competition.
Okay, 2 hands, come on. What do you have?
We are an underwear subscription for men.
What is it?
We are an underwear subscription for men.
Men, okay.
Yeah. So we don't have competition in India, not yet.
Underwear subscription for men, okay. That itself I'm interested in understanding. So I subscribe and you keep sending me underwear.
Absolutely. It's curated by one of the leading stylists. So
Stylists for underwear. When people walk around in underwear.
you should care about the finer details of life.
Wow. I think this is a story that will never be forgotten. Okay. So that you have a starting advantage, and you think that you don't have any competition.
Not really.
What about men who do not wear?
That's not part of my target audience.
Okay. So let's go to your story. I'll come back to this in a minute. I'm resisting jokes right now. Go ahead.
We are building apps to be smart TVs.
Smart TV. So what does it do?
Basically, we partner with video producers who they are presently available on web, like YouTube and YouTube and all that. Who are not available to TV audience, basically. Kids to even adults who just want.
Okay. I think the way you are explaining it, even I am not able to find any competition. But I think, yeah. Go ahead. Oh, you want to do your stuff.
Yeah.
You're not going to clarify what
No,
you
that's
said. Okay, fine. So the thing is this, that If you say no competition, you're out.
No.
Okay.
Not in India, very less competition.
Okay.
We have in like Vimeo is one of our companies.
You know why? So I'll tell you. So Vimeo is one of your companies. Okay. But Vimeo is.
Vimeo has got VHX and
Okay.
they are building TVs. So now Vimeo is our company.
Okay. How it is the market?
It's growing in India, but people who have Fire TV and Roku TV are audience.
So that is your audience. In that place you don't have very competitors, except Vimeo.
There's two sides.
Okay. So the reason, why do you think if I say no competition, people will not listen to you any further? Do you know why? No market. You are the first one. So first of all, they won't believe you. That is, they think that you have not done enough research to find a competition, not direct competition. So there is an indirect competition, right? So, but let's look at that. I'm not going to debate with this underwear subscription business right now. I need to think about it a lot. So what essentially, I'll give you a chance also for you to do. If there is no competition, that means if you're either correct or wrong. It's very binary, right? If you're wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to pay attention to you anyway. If you're correct, to me it is scary. I'm investing in the first company that is going to start in a marketplace. And unless I know how to do it, and you can always say Steve Jobs did the iPod and iPad and iPhone and all that sort of stuff, but none of us are Steve Jobs, believe me this. I mean, he took a lot of time to get to where he got to, and this friend Indu was referring to stabbed him in the back and threw him out of the company in Apple. Do you know that, right? Yeah. Steve Jobs went out and had to come back. So if you really, most of the time, if you want credibility, you want to enter a place, because if there is no market, if there is no competition, you can't identify a market. That's going to be my next question. If you can't identify a marketplace, you can't give any numbers. And you can't give any verifiable numbers. And every investor wants to know how big is the marketplace, what is the potential of this company to grow. Even if they take 10% of the market, how big are they going to get? And you won't get any of that information if you know competitors and you can't identify a marketplace. So that means the next question will be, what is your market category? You're going to have a problem there. Yeah, you can go on.
So we help organizations create instant virtual panels so that their clients can consult anywhere they like.
Okay. And nobody else, and nobody will understand, and none of the investors would know what is the importance of doing that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying is that when there is value in the product, you may not be able to resonate. So you need to figure out, take Indu's cue. Turn this into a story, and I'll give you some time to pitch later. Turn this into a story about a problem that people face today. Let's say that I have a startup. I have to make this crucial decision. I have let's say 20 lakhs. I have to make a crucial decision of whether I should bootstrap or I should get it funded, because I know that with 20 lakhs I can't bring in my first 10 customers. Okay. I need to consult with at least 3 to 4 experts. I need to consult with a bootstrapping expert, I need to consult with a funding expert, I need to consult with 2 or 3 startups that have done exactly what I have done, and I want this on a panel that will help me all the time, right? So now, do you guys understand what he's trying to do? Right? So when you start out with keywords like virtual panel, you lost half the audience, right? So speak a language, start with a problem. So in this case, the problem is the one. Start with a problem that they can understand. And if they don't understand your problem, keep on at it till they get to your problem that they understand. Then it becomes a little bit easier for you to do that. Okay, all right. So once you talk about a competition, the next question is, how is your solution better? It need not always be better. So don't be intimidated by this question. Okay, the solution need not always be better. The solution can be hey, there is a better solution, but it's in US and costs $5,000. Okay, my solution is not as good, but it's cheap. It's 500 rupees. So, it's not necessarily, it is better in some way because it's cheaper. So this better can be in different dimensions. You figure out all the vectors, figure out is it cheaper, is it more easy to distribute, is it a better story, it is less cumbersome to use, is it like, does it require some specialist to calibrate it, because does it automatically learn my normal pulse rate, my exercise pulse rate, and whole bunch of other whatever signals you collect for the hot thing and tell me, or does it require an expert to do all those kinds of things? There are 10 different ways, and you can get into more and more of these details. But when you get to this question, there is also an indicator. Let's say that you pitch this and you mention this, or you don't mention this and you just say, okay, I'm going to keep away one. And that is something you should try with all the people you pitch to. Keep away a couple of these things that you think are essential, that questions that investors should ask you. And if they don't ask you those questions, what do you conclude? Either not interested or not aware, right, of asking the right questions, or they're just like too tired. You are like 59th presenter to a group of people, right? It could be, so lack of questions itself is an indicator of lack of interest, okay? So what can you do? You can't do much about it, but so one of the reasons not to just keep on talking, but trying to get them questions is very early you can evaluate how serious this person is and how much time you want to really spend with them for doing it, kind of thing. And this is not just for Saturday's pitch, this is for your rest of your life as you are pitching it to different people at different points. Okay? How big is the market? It's a natural question. And then I think you can find this information, right? The key to this question, this information, is the very first question or the second question I asked. Which is the second question I asked? Who are your customers? And how is it related to how big is the market? You can find out, where do I find those customers? Right? Let's say my customers are, I'm building these learning games for kids in the age group of 5 to 10. Who are my customers? Come on. You guys are all like, business is going with business. Who are my customers? Parents of kids, yes, right? Same, similar kids, because some peer selling can happen. Who else? Parents of kids is too vague for me. I'm going to bring you down to such a fine detail. Schools. Okay, what is the next one?
People who got married 7 years ago.
Play centers.
Play centers. Okay, good. Yeah. So these are all the customer segments. So I'm going to show you. Okay. I'm violating all the rules of storytelling by Indu. I'm just like jumping all over the place from the beginning to the end. But I'm going to show you this stuff and this stuff, right? And we're not going to talk about it. But when you go to this lean canvas or business model canvas, whichever is your favorite thinking tool, okay, there is first one is a list of customer segments. You want to write down a list of parents, what are the one? Schools, peers, like other students. You want to write all of them and then figure out how to reach them. Do you know that, let's say that if I came and said, parents is fine, let us refine parents. So what is the next, if I want a more specialized version of parents, what is it? Economical demography. What did we say? He said, learning games for kids. So let me refine the problem also, or solution also. It's games that can be played on smartphones. So you refined it one more level. You're saying that for people who own smartphones, that means they are in the salary bracket. Nobody mentioned grandparents. That's another possible market, because grandparents always give things to their grandchildren and they would like to do something really useful and they would like to give these games or whatever, that kind of stuff. But kids don't have smartphones. So moms or dads have to buy them. And in the case of kids, who are more likely to buy? Educational games. More chance of moms buying. So can you find out moms who are 5 to 10-year-old kids, How many moms are there in Chennai? Does anybody know how to find that information out? Am I talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs? Census? Census is outdated by like 5 years.
Go to the corporation website, find out number of birth details, so that in the area, and percentage of people who are affluent, who are bracket, and then just go amount there, ballpark.
Okay, I'll take that. It's a very geeky solution, but I'll take that because it requires certain levels of knowledge. There is a cheap method of doing it.
Number of schools.
Number of students in schools. Okay, so that is basically what we are going to come up with. You know how easy it is to do? Just go, how many of you are not on Facebook? Huh? You're not on Facebook? Arun, it's shocking me. If you go to Facebook, all you have to do is I want to create an ad. And Facebook will lead you through a series of questions. You don't have to place the ad, so don't worry that you need to spend money. You go through a series of questions. You want to say women in the age group of, let's just make, I'm going to make lots of generalizations, so all the women and even men, you have to pardon me, is that we'll assume that roughly they get married at the age of between 25 to 28, let's say. I don't know what modern this thing is, but I'm talking from my generation. So if you take that and they say that they have children after 3 or 4 years, and the children become 5 or 8, so I said 5th grade to 10th grade or something like that. So you keep adding this mean, you come up with the age range of women. And mostly if women are at home, they'll be spending a lot of time with the kids. But if women are working, they may not be spending as much time as with the kids. And so they tend to buy, so you can go and verify this, right? They tend to buy more gadgets for the kids because they feel that since they are not able to spend that much of time, they should have good technology to take care of it. I'm just making a lot of assumptions, sir. But just follow this line of reasoning, right? So if you go to Facebook and I say, find me women with children in the age group of 35 to let's say 45 or 40, you pick your age and you can keep narrowing it. In Chennai, they'll tell you exactly how many people are there on Facebook. And Facebook is reasonable approximate. It's about what, 2 billion right now users. Is about roughly about 1/3 of the world population. The rest of them may not have internet access and they may be too old, or they may be people like Arun. So you can't sell them anything anyway. But you can get actually a statistics. And there are a lot of marketing tools that will let you do this. And I think we're going to do a marketing tool session in TiE, so there's a pitch for that session later. There are lots of tools like this that will let you find this information. But if you just, when the investor asks you this question, if you simply say, I think at least 1 million, about 10 lakhs is my potential market. And now there are two choices the person has. They say you're wrong, the number is 25 lakhs, good, you got a good piece of information. And you can ask them, how did you know this information and all that kind of thing, and get into a conversation. Or they have no clue, they'll say, oh, I see, and then they'll go away with 10 lakhs. So either way, it's okay. You can approximate, but I'm saying there are ways of going and finding this information. And it's very important for you to know your market. If you're going to be in a business, you have to know your market. The next question is, because that's important, how are you going to reach these customers? And everybody will say social media. I'll tell you, social media is not easy to reach. Not as easy as you think. So how are you going to reach these customers? How? Let's say that you'll say, oh, I have about 22 crore potential customers all over India. Great. What is the distribution between rural and urban? So, how many of them can you physically go and see? I mean, what do you know about their habits, reading habits? Where do they go? Where do they find information? So how are you going to how will you reach a customer is something that requires a lot of thinking. And you have to think, but you don't even have to go that far. The first question I'll ask you is, if you're a startup, I said, how are you going to get your 100 paying customers? That's all my question is. I don't care about how many customers or how big the market is. That comes later. You won't survive if you can't get like 100 paying customers nobody will even fund you to the next level. That is the minimum. That is the bootstrapping mode, right? Where you spend your own money and you find your first, it could be 10 paying customer, 100 paying customers, depending on whether it's B2B or B2C or whatever it is. Paying customers, not visitors to your website, not people who clicked on some ad of yours, not people who tried your product. Actually, these are guys who are paying you money. How do you get to that? And you may not be at that position right now, but how do you get to that? And have you thought about the path? And that is one of the most important things that I require from you. Okay? What is your value proposition? It's actually slightly overlaps with some bunch of questions I asked earlier. But people, you can say what is your USP and all that sort of stuff. But essentially, what is your value proposition? Why should customers care about your product or service? Why should the world care about it? Why should investors care about it? Right? So this is a question that you'll get asked a lot. Okay? And what is the current stage you are in? If you are just at an idea stage, you'll go to one set of people. If you are in prototype, you prototyped it, you showed it to a few people and it basically works, you'll go to a different set of people to talk to. If you actually deploy it in the field and you take the equivalent in services and you actually have a bunch of people but nobody has paid you yet, you're in a different stage. You have a few paying customers and they are growing every month, you are at a different stage. And if you are rapidly growing and you don't know how to handle growth, you are in a really cushy stage. But that's a different stage altogether, right? And the kind of funding models and the kind of level of interest that people will have in you is very different in each one of these stages, right? You have to know what stage you are in, right? There have been times when, VCs won't talk to you unless you are in the traction, you are in this rapid growth stage. I'm talking about Series A, Series B funding kind of thing. Series A, for example. If you already got Series A, I don't think you'll be in this mix. But I may be wrong. So you built a good bootstrap business. You're doing very well. You're profitable. You want to scale, and that is a reason for seeking funding. So that will come with an entirely different set of questions. That means all these questions have been answered. The market has proven you right or wrong at some point in time. Okay? So what's your business model? So I'm not going to talk through the business model because I want to take it back to the audience. But generally, almost everything I asked for is, except for these two blocks, is here. Customer segments. Okay. If you have 10 types of customers, put all of them. Okay. And the technique you use is this: go to some big Xerox shop, print out a big copy of this PDF, which is then stick it in your wall, take a bunch of sticky notes and keep posting it. Don't write on it. Because you're going to move stuff, you're going to remove it, and then keep staring at it. This is your life. This is what you're going to think about all the time. Your working life, right? So customer segments, customer relationships, because this came from the business model. Channels, I'll forget about it. The important things are, I think I'll go back to the previous one because I like it slightly better. Customer segments, what is the problem here? What is the solutions? What are the existing alternatives? Okay. Unique value proposition, your value prop. What is the unfair advantage, which is your USP? What are the channels? And people say channels. You can forget about channels. Channels could be, but you want to know how are you going to reach these customers. You're not going to go talk to every one of these customers. So your channel may be a website. Your channel may be a Facebook. Your channel may be Twitter, though I think that's not a great channel right now. It could be LinkedIn. I don't know what your channel is. Your channel could be distributors, affiliate marketing. Right? There are like a gazillion different things. Your channel is just a conduit through which you reach your customers. You better think about what it is going to be. What it is going to be in the beginning. In the beginning, you walk around, beat on doorstep, every doorbell, ring a doorbell and talk to customers in the initial stages. Or go to places like this, where a lot of people, your customers congregate and go and talk to them initially. We would ask you questions like, hey, what magazines do your customers read? If they still read magazines. What portals do they hang out in? What are the groups in which they exist? Where can you connect with them? Do they have professional bodies where you can go and make a presentation? Those are all like slightly deeper questions that will come later, but you need to think about channels. You can simply say, I have not thought through channels. I want to get my first 10 paying customers, then I want to get my 100 paying customers. Then I will start thinking about channels, because right now I think in Adaya to Tiruvanmayur I can find 20 potential customers. And I want to prove my product with them, and then I want to think about these things. That's an acceptable answer. But you have to, if you are really thinking about a bigger business, you need to look at it. You know why that is important? Each one of your customer segments, look at that, games, learning games. If you schools are what you're targeting, you are going through a very different channel. If parents are what you're targeting, school is a channel, but you may not be able to reach a lot of parents through schools. If you can't reach parents through schools, because some schools don't let you talk to parents, privacy and all that, what is the other method you're going to reach parents, right? So these are all the things that you need to think about. So for each one of these customer segments, the channel may be different, right? And for each one of these customer segments, the problem may be different, the solution may be different. That's why don't get the whole world is my customers doesn't work, because that means you have not spent enough time thinking through what it is. All right. This ends my session. I promised 20-30 minutes, and I think I took 1 hour. But then we also had some interaction. So, how are you doing for time? 3:30 right now. Okay. So we have 1.5 hours. Yes.
Shall I ask a question?
Yeah.
See, there is a general aversion or kind of a thing. Okay. Suppose now the e-commerce, okay, it's not a place to invest. Okay, those kind of things are going in. So how to overcome these kind of things? See, it happens with big companies. Now, what I personally feel is, we went through the learning cycle, and we know, okay, what are the things we should not do. And now when we are doing it correctly, and when the crowd is going on the other way, okay, don't want to invest in e-commerce. So how we?
Yeah, I think the e-commerce winter.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of parallels in the technology industry. There is something called a AI winter, artificial intelligence winter. Started in mid-50s, it became very big for some time, and then it died, and then became very big sometime, and then died. Goes out of fashion once in a while, based on how many companies are successful, how much money investors lost in doing this kind of thing, and all that sort of. There are ways of doing it, right? So I think these big category brands you can avoid to start with, right? The question is, why did the big e-commerce companies fail? Because what does failure actually mean, right? Could they not establish a business? Could they not sell it to the customers? Could they not make profits? Could they not manage competition? In the case of certain e-commerce companies, the competition might have come and killed them. And the competition can come and kill you at any point in time, right? Nobody thought Amazon would buy, Whole Foods and get into an entirely different game, right? And everybody who's competing with Whole Foods was sitting in a different happy stage, and now it's all gone. So what I'm saying is, this can happen at any point in time. But if you tag it with big, and I'll get some crowd intelligence also going on, don't worry about that. So if you see a value proposition, if you can share, so obviously if you think a kind of an e-commerce play has value in it, the chances that all the lessons learned before you're going to use it to build a better e-commerce company, I think you should be able to convince people about that. And the way to convince is not in just talking about it, but in showing. So anybody who shows a lot of traction in the initial stages has lots of credibility, right? So even the thing that we're talking about stories is that part of the story is that it establishes credibility. That I suffered through this problem. I know these are the 5 reasons e-commerce companies fail, and these are the 3 reasons why we think we may not. Okay, and this is the proof. Okay, then you can't argue with facts, right? You still may not get the big VCs because first of all, if you look at VCs, not everybody invests in every business. Right? They all, you look at the portfolio companies, they're this thing. You can figure out, there's a lot of useful information you can get from Arun about this whole mapping of the industry and what VCs do what is currently in fashion, what is out of fashion and all that. But if you are any solid business that is established and has a certain amount of traction, will get attention. Okay? From whom is a different story, whether it's an angel, it depends on how much you want, but gone are the days where I'm going to build huge scale up because I'm going to take over the entire market and then if you think about profit, that story is more difficult to sell today than before. Because that people have gone through that stuff. And all the companies, some of them made money, like Facebook is making money, but Facebook for a long period of time is, believe me, I'm going to make money more. But they finally started making money. But a whole bunch of other companies have not made money. And they can't tell that story anymore, right? So if Uber fails and Ola fails, because right now they don't have a sustainable model, if based on all the kinds of things they're trying to do, whereas that's not true with the Airbnb, for example. So there is I think the thing is not just about a particular e-commerce or B2B or something like that. It's just that certain models were believed, they gave the benefit of doubt in some cases, and that may not be applicable anymore. So I'll come back to that. Arun, you wanted to say something?
Sure. And basically on his point, so are you in the e-commerce business? Are you pitching an e-commerce business today? Okay, so the live question. So very valid. So last year we had in Pitch Fest a startup in the food tech space, and already some kind of interest among angels and so on. None of the VCs would even talk to her. Food tech, you could see their complete turn off immediately, because the year prior, from TiE Owl to so many other disastrous investments in that space, and it continues. And then Swiggy is the only company which has kind of survived that big downturn, and now there is more interest. But I think he's already answered your question, where the point is you cannot argue with facts, right? If you present that, and in fact you go upfront, you actually preempt that question. We know e-commerce is a bit of a low right now, but we have done A, B, C, D, and then you start off stronger. So that's the answer. But it's valid. Certain sectors go through a phase where, because of no fault of the company that you are representing, the sector has done very badly for other investors. People will get scared away, and that's very natural, right? So even if you are a stock market investor, you lost in pharmaceutical in the last 6 months, you will never touch a pharma company for some time, right? So very natural, but I think preempting that is a valid strategy at this point. Right?
And then proof. If you can show proof that's I think very niche e-commerce companies can still survive. Very niche things that I can't easily find. For example, like he was talking about in food, for example, Swiggy kind of thing. There are a lot of them came and went, and I have lots of friends who started some of these companies. They got out of PayPal, started a company, and then just went off. And this happens, right? There is certain cycle, and they come back to they just take off, work for a few years, probably accumulate enough money to come and give it a try. Because once you try being an entrepreneur, whether you succeed or fail doesn't really matter. You'll keep trying, because it's like it becomes a different lifestyle. And if you're persistent, and you'll find. I tell this story to everybody. I started my first company in 1980 November. When the term entrepreneurship was not known to me, we were called self-employed engineers. Slightly better than unemployed engineers. Definitely lower than employed engineers, and my whole family thought I was crazy. And my first company was a failure, 2 years. Then I said I was going to give up and go back to work, because work was available in plenty. But then I said, let me give it a try alone. Maybe I failed because of my partners. And said, the second company was profitable in 6 months. And then it grew, and then within 8 months I was like drawing 15 times more money than my previous salary was. And then everything is, we built some product that we sold in US, and then after that it's all like sold the company in US and all that stuff. So but through all this journey, I built about 23 to 25 products, out of which one product went from $0 to $1 million in 1 year's time. And that's what made us sell the company. There's a bunch of other products that did about $1 million over a period of a couple of years. A bunch of them that took a few $100,000. A bunch of them that no money. at all. Nobody was willing to pay. We sent out 100 boxes, 99 of them came back. One didn't send back, not because he paid. He was too lazy to send back, return the product. We couldn't do anything about it. So we've gone through all these stories. So there are more failure than success in the startup. But somebody who keeps learning from each failure, and then you fail fairly early, and then fail. There is thing about fail fast, fail. But you fail and you don't repeat those mistakes anywhere else. And in the second one you do, third one you do, and all that. The other mode is like don't try to boil the ocean. Try, bootstrap, slow and steady. Shamna Mitra says, and I agree with her, is there are more opportunities in the $5 to $20 million space than the $1 billion company space. So all the VCs and the investors will look at the $1 billion companies for the simple reason that they have to return whatever return 5x, 10x, nx, n being whatever current fashion, to the investors, right? All the investors from whom they have taken money. And they have a 7-year or 10-year period of time in which to do it. So if your business is a 20-year-old business, it will take 20 years for it to suddenly get money. You'll be chopped off at the 7th year or 10th year because they need to move this thing to somebody else and get out of the fund themselves. So, it's a very, all this funding stuff comes with its own baggage, right? So, but if you build a bootstrapping business, take 20 years, doesn't really matter. You keep on growing and become more and more profitable, and you could run this, and then at some point in time, you can spin off some part of the business which is very high traction, requires a lot more investment, and get the investment community involved, and you have credibility of building a business, then it works very well. So let's go back to the pitch, which is the focus of this stuff.
Dorai, couple
Yeah.
of points.
Yeah.
One is, of these, for Saturday, one PPT or no PPT.